Hey everyone, welcome back to the show here. Today I've got my friend Wayne Murphy as my special guest. We're going to be talking about ancient America, and in particular, a discovery that Wayne has actually made in the U.S. state of Wisconsin. So I'm just going to give a quick bio here for Wayne, and we'll kind of jump right in. Okay, so Wayne is a Mohican Nation Tribal Elder. He's got 29 years law enforcement experience, 1.5 years for the FPS. It's the Federal Protective Service, I believe, Home Land Security. He's got 3 years in the state of Wisconsin welfare fraud, and 3 years in the Wisconsin State Department of Corrections Violent Sexual Offender Supervisor. He's also been a private investigator, and he's also the founder of Team Templar North America, which is a really great group. And this is going to kind of lead into the discovery Wayne's made. So welcome, Wayne. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks a lot, Dave. I appreciate the invite and have a chance to talk about all the things that has happened on the Wisconsin project.
Yeah, definitely. So, Wayne, I found you through, I guess it was a Facebook group, a mutual friend that we have from an Oak Island connection, because as everyone knows, I've done a lot of work with the Oak Island television program and also outside of that program in addition. And it came to this was probably about 2 years ago, Wayne, right? Came to my attention that there was a possible Templar discovery site in the state of Wisconsin. And, I follow all the ancient America kind of lines of thinking, so I'm always interested and curious in what's going on. So I sent Wayne a message, and I connected, and I joined one of his groups, and we've been friends ever since. And I've been following the progress, and it's been really encouraging, and it's nice to see, basically following the actual information, following the actual leads, as opposed to what I have kind of seen happening with, for instance, with Hollywood, and you see a lot of filler information and, misleading content, stuff like that. And so anyone who's doing good work, I fully support. And of course, I'm very interested. And since I know quite a bit about America and, of course, American history, and even more important, even in this case, I think would be American geography and Canadian geography. Even just thinking about, okay, so that sounds like a ridiculous claim, but how would they have gone to Wisconsin? How do you actually get to Wisconsin? There's a couple options, actually probably maybe three options that I know of. And you know what? These people were master navigators. You can do it, believe me. We think, oh, you need all your modern technology and stuff, but it's actually possible to do with a little bit of knowledge and knowledge of how to also to portage your boats and everything, over small pieces of land if you have to move between lakes. But then we've also got the St. Lawrence River, which takes you awfully close to Wisconsin. You just have to kind of navigate the Great Lakes and you get there. And then there's also the Mississippi. I don't think they did that personally, but I'll let you take it away, Wayne. If you could just kind of inform people how you came about this discovery and where we are right now.
Well, thanks, Dave. The discovery basically was by accident. I was working on the Milwaukee Police Department at the time, and a guy kind of gets fed up with all the shootings and robberies and homicides, and they have a tendency to wear on you. So I used to come back to our tribal lands to hunt, me and my family. So I was just in our normal hunting area that we've changed hunting areas every so often, so as not to deplete the natural resources and just to keep things interesting. And while I was going through the woods, it was in the wintertime. We had about a foot of snow in late November, and I was heading towards the river where there's a natural draw where deer like to pass through, and that's what I was trying to get to. And as I came through the heavy woods, I noticed a change in the elevation of the ground. And what was kind of mysterious about this is that all the years hunting back there, this is the first way I came in because I wanted to enter it in a new way. You always do that to a new hunting spot. You don't want to give yourself away. And as I approached, all of a sudden I stopped because under a foot of snow, you can't really tell what's underneath there. So you got to be pretty careful. I took a few more steps and all of a sudden I'm standing almost on a ledge. it was a large rock outcropping, and it probably was 30 feet down to the ground. And, being a police officer, you're naturally curious about everything. And you have to know why and who could have, is there anything more to this? So I worked my way around this. It took me about 20 minutes to find a safe trail trying to get around this big structure. And as I approached it from the east, I noticed a large. Right? Pardon?
You were up on the ledge, and then you had to actually come down.
Right. I had to go around it because at that point, I couldn't see no other way around it. So I started following the edge of the ledge. And when I got to one part, it was only about 4 feet off the ground. I was able to slide down it into the snow. I wasn't too concerned about getting hurt back then, much younger. So, and as I looked to the east or to the west, I saw this large crack in this rock. It was probably 2 feet wide at the top, and as it got towards the bottom, it got wider. Well, I went up and looked inside, and I could see it was going into something. And we have wolves and mountain lions and bears. And what I did is I threw a large stick in there to make sure that if somebody threw it back out, I probably wouldn't have went in. And it hopefully wouldn't have been a mountain lion or a wolf. Yeah. So, curiosity. I wanted to know what was in there, if any animals were using it. And so I made my way in there. I was able to stand up and walk into it at that point. That would have been the mid 80s. And once I got inside, it made a hard turn to the right or to the north. And all of a sudden, everything just changed. It had flat rectangular walls. It was almost like a rectangle. There was a round stone that was faced on top. And what I mean by round, it was, if you take a rock and you make it flat on both sides, say about 1.5 feet, and it's probably 4 to 6 feet in circumference. And then it's about 1.5 feet thick, and that it was round all the way around, and it was set on top of this structure. The walls were flat at 90 degrees, the back wall, and then towards the north, through later investigation, it was determined through erosion and things like that. We have some really bad winters. Sometimes we get 130 inches, 140 inches of snow. So with the melting and thawing, it probably was on top of there in a large rock it was a boulder about 4.5 feet high. It fell. So as I climbed over the top, I could actually exit the north side of it now. And as I look back, I said, this is man-made. This is not natural. So I climbed back and went back inside and started looking it over some more. And I thought at that time, this is really odd. This shouldn't be here. The walls are too perpendicular to each other. You could almost stick your hands out to both sides, and they were perfectly a rectangle shape. It almost at that time the top was all covered. There was no sunlight or anything coming in. The base of it was all flat, perfectly flat. There was no debris except for what animals had been there. And so I kind of just placed that in the back of my mind. So fast forward to 2018, I was hunting that area again. And I'll tell you something, Dave, what's unusual about that area is I've always noticed this, that anytime that I was back there, there was this feeling of displacement. It was, I don't know how to describe it. It's just like you're out of phase for a few seconds. You're just not sure where you're at. And I've hunted these woods all my life. I'm not getting lost. I know very well. But whether regardless, I have a compass or electronic compass, they don't always work too well back there. And there's something going on.
And so anyway, you're not the only one who's experienced that back there. Is that correct?
Yeah, my younger son, we were sitting around one time at hunting season talking about various, where we were hunting and what you seen. And I just asked him, I said, Paul is his name. And I said, have you ever felt like you were lost when you were there? And he kind of looked at me kind of odd, and he says, yeah. He says, more than once. I said, well, how did it feel to you? He says, it was just like I'd get back there and all of a sudden I just didn't know where I was at.
Yeah.
And I said, how long did it last for you? He said, sometimes it was just a couple minutes. Sometimes it'd be 10 minutes. He says, but physically I knew where I was at, so I wasn't worried. He says, but the feeling was odd. And I says, well, now I know there's something more to this.
Because you hadn't shared with him that you felt kind of a little bit off. You just basically, and that's of course that's good science, is that you go in, the person doesn't know what you experienced, and you ask them with a blank slate. It's good investigation, obviously, too. That's how you do it. What do you feel? And he told you without him being let on, right?
Right. That's what you do as an investigator. You don't want to let them tell you what they know. If he'd have said, no, I've never felt odd or out of place. And that would have probably been the end of it. And I probably wouldn't have said too much more. But then you fast forward quite a few years later, I'm going to kind of stay on the same subject. We were back there doing a reenactment shoot. And my oldest son with me, James, unfortunately looked just exactly like I did when I was in my 20s. And I always kid him about that. Maybe he'd grow out of it. But we're heading back to the tomb to do the reenactment shoot. And the camera guy's flying his drone. He wanted to get some drone shots overhead. And so he's standing in the middle of the river. It's frozen, obviously. It was in late January. And the sound man is there. And he's looking at his whatever controls he had, the drone could see. And I said, what do you want us to do? He said, nothing. He says, I'm up about 500 feet, he says, and the drone's lost. He says, I don't know if I can get it. I don't know if I can get it back. He said, it can't find itself. So we
I didn't
stood
know
around.
that.
Go ahead.
No, I didn't know about that addition to the story. But of course, on Oak Island, it's notorious for that happening. They put drones up. I've had stories related to me where, specifically related with the Oak Island swamp, is that when it goes over a certain part of the swamp, it literally just it actually crashed. It just fell out of the sky, just like straight down. Thousands of dollars of equipment, man. So there's something that's not imagination when you see that, especially when you can see physical effects of something. You have to look at that seriously, right?
Right. I had talked to a gentleman that had been on Oak Island and was putting sensors there. I'm not going to say his name for privacy reasons. And we talked on the phone. Obviously, he's from Nova Scotia quite a bit. And I said, have you, I was telling him about these feelings that I was having and stuff like that. He had sent me a sensor, not even knowing me, because I know his wife very well, and we know the person we're talking about. And so they sent me a sensor, and I set it out there for 2 weeks, and the first time it recorded nothing. And so we talked again, and then I did some changes to it. The next time it recorded, he said, over 800,000 bits of information in 10 or 15 minutes, and it quit working. So he must have got tied up doing his stuff with Oak Island, but I never did get the final report on what it read. It was like 73 pages of information that his computer software could read. It was too big for my computer to open it, so I had to go find a friend who's got a large computer. And he said, Wayne, it's like 73 pages. And I said, just show me one. And there's all this codes for computers, and from the top to the bottom was just full, all lines all the way across with numbers and dashes and everything. 73 pages. So we had sent that to him, and he said, yeah, he got it. It would take him probably a couple of weeks to go through it. But unfortunately, I think he had something going on that he just couldn't get around to that. But trying to use that sensor is the same ones they used on Oak Island. It wouldn't work all the time. It would shut down, start up, shut down, and finally, when it did run, I always kept it in the same location. I marked it, and then when he would have me move it, then I would also mark that location, the day, date, and time, and where it was setting, so that we had comparatives. And then I'd let it run 2 or 3 days, go back and check it, download it, and then move it to another location that he suggested. Did the same thing. Everything was documented very well, where it was sitting, when it was sitting, how long it was sitting, the direction. It's got a all directional signal on it, so I wasn't worried about that. The antenna, I had it up into a tree, is it's about a 6-8 foot piece of antenna lead. So the signal was there, and then when it would work, it was just like overloaded, and when it didn't want to work, it was just flatlined.
Yeah, very, very strange. And that's the thing too, is that, again, of course, anytime I go into an area that I'm trying to investigate, I try to go in with a blank slate, and I'm not letting my, subjective opinion influence, ideally, what I'm experiencing. And you just have to go with what happens, And so if you're seeing some strange things, and also cross-check it with other people, you want to bring in the instrumentation, and especially when it's associated with something that looks like it's out of the ordinary, megalithic structures, some kind of an ancient site or alignment or something like that, then for me, I immediately get pretty suspicious, because people talk about all the time, especially in the metaphysical world, oh, there's some interesting energy, whether it's out at Stonehenge or wherever you're at. And there's so many accounts of it. And a lot of people who are not people who are prone to exaggerating, also that's a good way to look for it. Am I getting the story from someone that most people feel is credible? Someone that doesn't over embellish things like that. It's, of course, a very good way to proceed with investigations. But the thing I'd mentioned to you too, Wayne, is that it's one of those things where when I go into a site, I can feel, essentially, the body is a biosensor, if you're able to pick up on the different wavelengths and energy and things. So when I cross different lines, when I'm traveling through the country, or if I'm walking somewhere through the woods or something, if there's an energy change in the energy field, I can feel it immediately. And of course, I'd be very interested to see how far out that anomaly goes, the EMF anomaly.
When I got to thinking about this more, and as an investigator, we don't presume anything. If the facts lead you away, that's the way you go. And then when we get to a certain conclusion, we go back and try to disprove those facts. Did I make a mistake? Did I make an error? Did I misjudge something that I seen? And you go back and you check it, and then you follow it to that certain point. And if it's solid, well, then you continue forward. And then if it stays solid all the way to your last point of investigation, then you can rest assured that it's pretty solid. So what I did is I went on the GSA website and started typing in magnetic readings for that area. And
was that a survey? What is that, Wayne? What does that stand for? Some kind of survey?
That's issued by the government. As kids, we used to see these government planes flying overhead, and they were low-flying planes, and below them, about 100 feet, they would have a large cable, and it looked like a 5-gallon pail they were holding, but they were looking for minerals in the ground and things like that. So I was able to get one of these readings, and I was able to get the pictures in it, the EMF readings. If they use 2 or 3 different types of way to measure it, they use a bar chart, 0 to 7. Then they use a color chart over these areas. Then pink is the hottest. This was hotter than the highest number that it was. I was off the scale of the GSA chart.
was it fairly localized, Wayne, or was it a larger area?
It
Not
seems to be just in that area, and depending on what time I went back and tried to get into that same site, and other sites like that, I can't even get into them no more, and I don't know why. It's public information, but I had saved all of those information, and we had put it out on one of our videos, the Wisconsin project, and nobody it started making sense. The rock is quartz. Well, it's a lot of quartz and granite, rose granite and quartz, but it's just such an odd feeling that when you were there, sometimes it was nothing, absolutely nothing. It was like somebody turned a switch off, and you were just comfortable, you know. Then other times it was so annoying that it almost felt like you were being watched. And I'd even turn around, look behind me, see if, somebody's behind me or something. You get that sense when an animal is coming up on you. And
that's
it
really,
just
really
always kind of bothered me, Dave.
it's really interesting because I'm sure you mentioned it to me because we've been talking for quite a while, but in terms of the feeling as if you're being watched, I've experienced that before actually in Massachusetts. And it's weird, you can't explain how you feel that, but something feels like, and you turn around and there's nothing there and you say, okay, that was strange. But what I was going to mention really quickly is that in the investigations that I've done, scientific investigations I've done, especially at interesting ancient sites throughout the country, I found a few different things. And I think I immediately think of three things, three possibilities. The first one is, of course, you mentioned the quartz and everything. It's the local geology. You want to know what kind of rock is underneath you. You want to know if it's conductive. Sometimes there's sometimes there's uranium beneath your feet. And the places that I've been that have uranium, really strange things going on there. And again, I'm making the connection because I feel them independently, and then I go look it up, and it says, yeah, there's a huge uranium. Okay, well, uranium is radioactive, so there's probably is some kind of association. That's energy. That's number one. I always look at geology, usually first if I can. Number two is that if it's somehow, and a lot of times they're associated, but obviously I do a lot with metaphysics and the spirit world and all these things. So sometimes what happens as well is that if there's sentient life, say there's spirit, something in the spirit world that's there that you can't see. Some people don't believe in that, but I've had so many experiences that it's like secondhand to me right now. And they can move around, and if they're not in a localized area, maybe they're further out in the woods sometimes when you visit there. Maybe they're not actually around the tomb. That's another possibility. That could account for some of the fluctuations. And then the third one would be the actual receiver, the human receiver, which means that when you go in, depending on where your frequency is, they may always be there. It may just actually be what you're tuning into that day, how much free-flowing energy you have through your body to allow you to either block it out or, have your energy above that, or you're receiving it. So for me, it's those three things immediately, Wayne. And then, of course, you can take, handheld EMF detectors in with you to see if there's spikes in RF radiation, stuff like that, which I always do as well.
Yeah, I had done that. I had ordered an EF meter radiation detector, and I even had sound reproduction equipment where you could broadcast multiple tones on octaves and everything. In our studies, I'm just going to touch on this a little bit. It's called cymatics, and before I probably should get into that cymatics, it's just an amazing study of sound and how it affects movement of rocks and things like that. I have never been involved too much in the metaphysical world. I understand, there's things that people know and can see. There is absolutely another spiritual world out there, and I've been part of that for a long time. But as far as being a so-called spiritist, I'm not, because I don't know enough about it. But through good friends with a mine in Canada who has a, well, there's two of them, and both of them are able to do what they call the readings. I don't know the scientific name for it, but they're very well known, and they work. One of them has worked for a major police department locating missing kids. So they asked me if they could read the site. I don't really understand what that means. I don't know what the process is. They said to send them some pictures and things, and they wanted certain just general pictures, and they said send something that we don't know nothing about, to try to keep it, not to put it in any type of direction. So I found some pictures from 2018 and 19 that they would have no knowledge of. So I just sent them various sites of the area and things like that. And about a week later, she calls me up and she says, "You're not going to believe this, Wayne." I said, "What?" She says, "The Templars were there." She says, "I saw them." She said there was over 20 of them there who had came, and there's graves there also. And when the Native Americans were there, they were kind of upset because they weren't leaving. They came when it was in the winter, and they had such a hard time that the Native Americans helped them out. And come that spring, they showed them how to hunt and get fish and plant and everything. And the tensions were starting to grow because the Native Americans thought they were going to move on. But something happened. She said to them, the Templars, that she didn't say exactly. I don't think they were killed. It sounded like that maybe they were just wore down from the elements, and they said they all died. And they're there. She says she said she saw them. That's a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I don't know enough about it to talk about it. I'm into the physical evidence of things. If it's there and I can see it and touch it and able to bring it to a reasonable conclusion, and that's what I do. But I just thought I'd throw that aspect in there because it's something that has never been discussed before.
Yeah, and for me, it's whether people believe in other, certain people's ability, especially with paranormal and in the metaphysical world or not, it can't hurt you to, have that as one of your like 50 or 100 pieces of evidence. That's the thing for me, Wayne. It's like, I'm not. Sometimes I might not even think that's what it is, but hey, if I know someone that's good with certain things that I can't do, it's not going to hurt. So bring it into the, the piece of the evidence and put it in your back
Yeah.
pocket. And it might
Yeah.
turn out 5 years that you actually needed that. Now you have the data and you didn't say, no, I'm not going to be open to that. The more you're open to different avenues, the more you learn.
Yeah, one thing we thought of it, and we always talked about it on our team, is that we said, I always said this is like a table. The fourth leg of that table is the paranormal. I don't want to go down that road, but like you said, it's always good to look at alternatives. And so then with the EMF and this other two people coming to almost similar conclusions, real or imagined, that's not up to me to decide. I'm just taking in this information and filing it away. And it's for the larger project, as a whole.
Okay, now Wayne, so just to let people know, so the reason that you believe Templars came to the site is because of some carvings, I believe, right?
Correct. You fast forward to 2018, I'm hunting back there again. I'm sitting in my ground blind, and it was a unusual warmer fall, and there wasn't no snow. We get seasons like that. You go all hunting season, and sometimes it'll be 50 degrees, and the next time it's 25 below.
Yep.
So I'm sitting there and I look and I see this rock, and it just had an odd shape to it, and it looked like we have these green tree frogs out in the woods there because it's damp, depending on where you're at. And I just thought the rock looked kind of cool. It was about 5 feet tall, had green lichen all over it. Must have been 2 or 3 inches thick. So I just shot a couple of pictures of it. Later on at our elder Christmas party for the tribe, I started looking at them pictures, me and my brother, and I zoomed in and I could see some carvings on the rock. So this would have been in December, and we couldn't get back there till March. So I was telling my brothers about that. Did you ever see the tomb that's back there, the cave? No, there ain't no such thing. And so I let them back there, and they couldn't believe it. One went with me, the other one, he wasn't physically able to, and he couldn't believe it. So my nephew and his sons were along. So I said, I want to take you to this rock that I see these carvings on. Well, I walk up to this carving, this rock, and I looked and I said, see that cross carved in that rock? My older brother, he couldn't see it, but my nephew's son, he come up there and says, yeah, it's right there. I can see that cross like no problem. And so I had taken pictures of it, and I still have them to this day. It was a cross pate. And boy, now if you find something like that in the woods by a single rock, it's I don't know what to say. It's something that shouldn't be there. It's out of place for the time, and it's out of place for the land in itself. And
And
it's a
yeah,
European marking.
can you explain what a cross pate looks like?
The Knights Templar use different types of cross pates depending on the era. If you can just think of four lines of equal length and at 90 degrees to each other, each arm is at 45, and then at the top it flares out a little bit on each of the arms. So it's similar. Well, the Mi'kmaq have it on their flag. They got the Templar cross, and a lot of the Abenaki, they're covered in some of the tattoos that the Templars were using. They even have the 4 round stones, the gospel seals, tattooed on their body.
Yeah, it's amazing. And of course, once the evidence sort of stacks up, these things, they're not like in isolation. It's things that support each other, and they're from different, sometimes it's social activities or spiritual texts, or it could be geology or locations and things. And when you see these ideas they shouldn't be related, and then somehow they're popping up everywhere, that it starts to form a convincing story. And
Well,
whether
what
we
we
like it
did,
or not, I mean,
yeah, what I did is I tried to disprove it. We talked about the waterways of St. Lawrence coming down through the Hudson Bay area and off the Atlantic. And one has to remember in the year 900s and 1000 AD, the terrain is a lot different than it is today. When I have taken other people back there, and they say, well, this is terrible to get through. And I says, it wasn't like this back then. Back then, it was large pine trees. Some of them would probably have been 4 or 5 feet across, and they were 10 feet apart. And there was very little underbrush because of the canopy of all the limbs and leaves, and So it wasn't hard traveling, and all the Native Americans knew the trails. And if you were befriended by them, they would show you these trails and the easiest routes. One thing that the Vikings had is the ability, they had these shallow draft boats that they would bring with them. They were able to go into rivers, and you can go over Niagara Falls, coming down the Hudson, coming down the Lawrence, and get around that. And there's old Native American accounts. There's a cave underneath that falls that Native Americans had used, but the portaging wouldn't have been that far. And then once you make it down to Lake Erie, you can come all the way across Michigan, Huron, all the way to Lake Michigan to the western shore of Wisconsin.
yeah, absolutely. And like as I mentioned in the beginning too, is that these people were incredibly strong and intelligent. I mean, probably more than we could even really imagine in our day and age. And the further back you go, of course, I do a lot with the ancient world, and understanding the planets and the stars and the body and all these things at such a high level. And it's always good to who knows, maybe they were correct, maybe they weren't correct. Well, you question it, you bring it to a scientific inquiry, and you see what you come out with. But what's interesting to me is that, first of all, the first time I saw the site, you'd sent me a picture of the site, and I didn't see the tomb initially. I actually, maybe I've seen the video, but the picture you sent me was actually just of the forest there, like of the woods, and I could see the trees, and you're up on the bluff and everything. And the sensation I got was actually very peaceful. And I was talking to one of our mutual friends, and I asked her if she felt that it was a decent energy, and I believe she agreed with me. She said, "Yeah, it does look pretty nice," because I always have a feeling, and this shows you how to go about good science and good investigation. I have feelings about sites, especially depending. A lot of it has to do with visual. If I see something, I'm like, oh, I don't like that energy. It doesn't look good to me. Or, and this is intuition, but I'm actually really a scientist. But you use everything at your disposal. I'm not going to put the intuition in the trash can. That's ridiculous. If it's to help me to accent, what I'm trying to understand here. But it felt good. It felt good to me initially, Wayne, and then the magnetism and stuff. I've had both experiences. I think it might be some kind of magnetism. I'll put that out there. Whether that has to do with the movement of something that's like non-corporeal, which means not in a physical body, like a spirit or even a ghost, or it has to do with the geology that underlies, in the bedrock and everything like that. There's also like a fairly decent moving stream, I believe, right down from the area there that cuts through the Stock Muncie Reservation. Anytime you have moving water, that's a really good conduit of energy and all kinds of. And you're talking paranormal for the spirit world. It's also a very good conduit for that, for time travel, all kinds of things that are in metaphysics.
Well, the quartz is an amplifier. They're using quartz crystals now for computers. They say on a piece of quartz 1 inch square, 1/16 of an inch thick, they can put the whole Library of Congress on.
Yeah, exactly. And have you seen that before, Wayne? Have you seen the picture of that little chip? How small it actually is?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And last summer we had a team out there. We were doing some more follow-up work and investigating further. There was 4 of us there, and one of the other guys with us, he had found something. He had actually found 2 things which we documented, and they turned out to be quite remarkable. One of the guys that was there, he's kind of sensitive, he said, to paranormal stuff, and he was walking near where the cross pate is carved on the rocks, and he stopped. He says, "Get over here, look." He didn't. He was just in a t-shirt because it was warm enough in September. And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Look at my arms." I said, "What's wrong with your arms?" He said, "Look, the hair's standing up on my arms." So the video guy, he was taking pictures of that, and I was about 10 feet away, and I'm looking. It looked like the hair was dancing on top of his arms. I didn't say nothing. I just like, whoa, I don't know what to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, they had the Skinwalker Ranch show, which is also on the History Channel. There was an instance of that where they had someone come out with technology, and they had to get him off of the bluff because he was, he's having like a mental breakdown basically because it was so strong, whatever that energy was moving through the area. And we don't all receive it. That's the thing. But there's plenty of things that I can't do that other people can do. And for me, it's non-existent. For them, it's totally there. So I think we need to embrace all the tools that are at disposal.
Some people are sensitive to other things. On the police department, you learn to have a sixth sense. As a kid and growing up into my adults and my teens and adulthood, sometimes I'd be with somebody and I'd say, "Yeah, when we come around the corner, you're going to see this." And we'd come around. I was rafting one time. I said, "When we get around this corner," I said, "there's going to be a bridge overhead, a cable bridge over the water." And the people I was with said, "Well, you've been here before?" I said, "No, this is my first time." We got around the corner, sure enough, there was a cable bridge over the river. And that's happened more than once. I was able to, don't know why. I can't tell you, Dave, why. It's not like I got some magic power, because I don't. I'm a pretty simple guy. If I can prove it, I can. And if I can disprove it, I will do that also. I think it's important that your investigations are clean. And what I mean by that is that you don't cause them to sway one way or the other. You can turn an investigation to go anywhere you want if you're a poor investigator. But if you're an honest investigator, you let them facts take you where they go. And they may go a little ways or they may go a long ways. In this case, we have already found markings at the sites. We have 5 sites now. My son Paul has found 2 sites. And there is a mark that we found last summer that we work with Sean Williamson. He's an ancient stone master and an expert on Knights Templar. Just an amazing resource of information and a very honest guy. He has left archaeological sites and digs because he found that they were fudging the numbers and fudging the details. And we had talked. It took a while to get a chance to talk to him or to him to talk to me for any length of time. And you know, people want to say, well, what kind of contract do I have to have? I said, I usually write my contracts on the back of postage stamps because if it gets any bigger, then you're just trying to lie to me. I said, right. So I got no time for that. But one of these symbols that we found last summer, possibly 2, appear to have the same symbology as in Roslin Chapel in Scotland.
Which, of course, is a well-known, I believe, Freemason site. Is that correct, Ryan?
It's actually a Knights Templar. It was one of their strongholds. And they were, I'm not going to tell you all the things they were doing there, Dave. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. It's just that we're trying to get the funding to go to get myself over to to Scotland, to Roslin Chapel to do comparatives on these symbols. We already have a good idea by through photographs, but it's a big difference being there in person. And when you talk about the Viking travel, we're putting together a video right now on the Viking travel. It's going to be just a couple of short videos by Sarah Jane Goldingham. She's going to be coming on. We've already done the voiceover. It's in editing right now. We're going to be adding some pictures to it. It should be coming out within a week. And she's got a master's in Norse history and Viking cultures, the sagas. Good to explore the first female Viking that came to the New World and had a child. Just unbelievable amount of information. So we're doing a short video with her. Should be hopefully without in a week or 2.
Oh, wonderful! Yeah, yeah. It's all the information coming out. It's really good to see the different avenues. You know, we can try to piece them together. One of the things I was going to say too, Wayne, is I think sometimes people have they don't like the terminology, you know, especially when it comes to metaphysics and the paranormal and stuff. You can call it whatever you want. You know, sometimes I don't even think about it. It's like, okay, well, no, I'm aware that I can move around the field fairly comfortably. I've had a lot of experience with it myself. But you know what? Like you, Wayne, I'm a normal guy, and on the daily basis, I just kind of go through my day. I pick up a book, I read for a while, I send some messages to my friends, follow up on emails, maybe watch a television show or something, and then I'm good. You know, I'm not. Yeah. I don't live and breathe the topic, but since I have the ability, you know, I spend some time with it because there's things that we can elucidate from it. So you know, that's the thing. People don't get hung up on the technology. That's what or the terminology. Excuse me. If people don't want to, if they don't like the topic, or if it's not part of your religion or spiritual beliefs or whatever, that's fine. Call it whatever you want. You know.
Yeah, one thing that I don't do is dismiss information. I take any and all information that I can get, and we're very careful in what we get. But if you're a lazy investigator, you'll only pick up the stuff that you want to find. And if you're a real good investigator, you'll look at everything and all possibilities. Because I don't know about the metaphysical world doesn't mean that there isn't people who do, and that possibility doesn't exist. You have to be open-minded enough and professional that there's many ways to get to the same place. And I've consulted with experts around the world, Hamilton White and Carl Cookson, and they saw some of our photos very early on, and it wasn't until sometime later that Hamilton had told me. He says, I recognize them right away. He says, them are Templar. He says, and I had a guy from Rome, Italy call me. Not sure how he found out about me, but we went through Messenger, then we ended up talking on the phone. And he said, I heard you found some Templar stuff, and he was writing a book and wanted to know if we could use some of the pictures that we had out there. And I said, sure. And he says, do you have anything with triangles? I says, oh yeah. So I sent him one. Within an hour or so, he sends another one back, a comparative. He says, you know where this is? And I says, no. He said, it's in a church in Italy. In Rome, he said, this is a known Templar church, exact same symbol, almost the exact same size. Is it done by the same people? I don't know. But when you find this type of connection, and everything starts to begin to multiply. We did every investigation you do, Dave, is backwards. I treat this as a major crime scene. You have to investigate everything backward. Who could have got here? How they got here? What's the way they travel? Who they came in contact along the way? Did they have the means? Did they have the know-how to put the marks here? Why would they put the marks here? And then you just follow that backward, and you keep building small steps. And then who would they have run into? Well, obviously, it was the Native Americans. If you didn't befriend the Native Americans or they didn't trust you, you weren't getting too far. The Vikings didn't have a very good time with them when they first met. And we explained that in one of our videos. It's an introduction video, about 17 minutes long. And people can go to YouTube and look up the Wisconsin Project and see some of our work. And it kind of brings you through the initial discovery, all the things that we're doing to evidentiary wise to bring this to fruition. And I talk to people in France and Canada, all over the world, Norway. They contact me and they're asking me questions. Can you look at this for me? Does this look familiar? And obviously I don't have some of their expertise. I rely on Luc Archimold. He's from France. He's a researcher for other researchers. It's just unbelievable guy. He just I don't think I could carry his books home from school, but he really likes the work and the detail that we're doing and the honesty of it. And he said, he told me one time, we talked, and he says, of all the groups out there, Wayne, he says, Team Templar North America is the only one doing it the right way. He says, I've looked at your stuff you sent me. I've checked it out. I've tried to disprove it. And he says, I can't. And so we were just talking the other day, and I was telling him about some of the trade stuff that we had found and traced. And oh my gosh, when I had sent him this information and he responded back, we put together some dates in the 1200s of possible travel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and to your point that you mentioned about a minute ago too, is that I think when you show up on a new land, the way that you're received has everything to do with your attitude towards other people and other human beings. So if you have a group of people like the Templar coming in that are obviously very upstanding guys, that have high integrity, they have religious and spiritual components to how they act and react and all these things, then the natives are going to sense that, I feel, and say, okay, we feel like we can probably trust these guys. Now, you got other groups, and you've shared plenty of stories with me, Wayne, and I know them myself as well, but you've shared some I hadn't heard of. But when you have other groups of people coming in, such as the Vikings, probably like the Spanish, who are potentially more aggressive. I'm not saying always. I didn't see it with my eyes, but the stories suggest that, a lot of them. Then how do you think, the response is not going to be great? And one of the things that I think you brought up to me too is that, I can't remember the timeline. I believe it goes back to the BC era, actually. But I think that the people native to the Americas were well aware of Judaism and Christianity a very, very, very long time ago. And I think a lot of them, when they saw people coming back over, they said, oh, these are the people maybe that brought us or maybe these are some of our lost brothers that are coming back to visit us. Because, having the tattoos and a lot of the symbology with crosses and everything all across the Americas, you just have to wonder, how long has this been going on? It seems like a very long time to me.
And one of the other things that we were doing too, like Verrazano, I think it was the 1524 or something. He was going to actually Florida, and he ended up in North Carolina. And we have done a whole bunch of research on these lines of travel, and we found some just unbelievable stuff, and they're not coincidences. I had discussed this with Luke at length and shared some of our research, and he just said he just couldn't believe it either. But then he sailed, he was going south, and he saw the Spanish fleet and turned around and went north. So then he ended up in Narragansett Bay, where that's my grandmother. She's full-blood Narragansett. So that's where her people came from, along with the Mohican. The Mohicans, they could assemble 20,000 warriors in a few minutes' time. They had great communication. They had great trade. They were a very kind people. Verrazano writes in his codexes. I actually got to read one of them that he had his notes in, not personally, but just online. And he talked about that when he came to the villages, they would come out to meet him. They offered him their place to stay. They would give him everything they had. As a sign, it was a sign that Native Americans do, is when you meet a stranger who's in need, you give them your stuff, because that shows you're a people of kindness. You have great wealth, and it's just things that I learned growing up on the reservation, and it was always practiced in my house, the strangers. And but the Narragansett were showing him, Verrazano, how to plant by Pleiades, by the stars, how they grew their crops according to the constellations and things like that. And then the minute he saw gold in the streams, and he asked them, somehow they were able to communicate, whether it was very good or bad, I have no idea. Then they said, well, don't you, apparently the conversation went that they didn't like the gold, the Native Americans, because they were using copper. They found copper to be more useful. And one of the things that we were trying to figure out, this communication thing, was it was customary for travelers who would come to these lands, they would kidnap children. And we got the accounts of that in the French, the Spanish, the Norse were doing that. You'd capture young kids, 9, 10 years old, even younger, and then you teach them your language, and now they could go back and you had a communicator. So that this was being done all the time. And Verrazano, he got run out. He tried to kidnap a young boy and a young girl. And after a few weeks there at their village, they really found out what their true intent was. It wasn't coming as people that lost or needed help. They started their truest intent as conquerors. And when they've invited the chiefs and their families to come out to their boat and dine, and they said when the Native Americans approaching in their canoes and boats, the men were so lewd, yelling from the ship, they wouldn't allow their women to go on the boat, and they were very reluctant. And then so they ran them off, and then they went north, and that word traveled. As long as they were traveling north, the communication system was so good. By the time they got to the Abenaki wouldn't let them land. they would only trade with them by hanging baskets over a cliff. And their men would put trinkets in there and they'd pull them up and they would hand down copper or whatever, maybe food items and things like that. And to show their displeasure with them when their ship sailed away, they actually mooned them as a sign of disrespect because you were people that we could no longer trust.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is that you get what's coming to you. So I wish people learn that more. I mean, you had the way back when you were teaching the original principles of Earth, the pure spirituality and the stars and planets and about the biology of the human body and stuff like that. I don't think we had any of this stuff. And people want to
Yeah.
know, well, how we end up in the situation we are right now in this world. And what I say is, I mean, look at what you're putting out to people. Is that something that you want your kids to see or your family to see? Would you be proud of that? How many?
Yeah.
We have to ask these questions on a daily basis, and then you have to alter how you act and how you think based on what that belief is. And then, guess what? People feel that and they respond to it positively, and then you've got a good connection. Then you don't have
Yeah.
stuff like that anymore.
You have to have honor in things that you do. Everybody that works on our team is there because they're, number one, they want, if they've dealt with all the liars and all of the nonsense. They've been on some our film guy right now, our producer and director, Alan Scott, he worked for the BBC. He quit because he wouldn't tamper with the filming to make it look different, and he just walked away. And Sean Williamson did the same thing. Everybody who comes onto this team, they go through an integrity test. And if we can't trust you to tell the truth all the time, even if it hurts our investigation, don't bother hanging around us. And I think that has hopefully that it has kind of spread to people that we come in contact, like yourself, all the people around the world that I've talked to. Who am I? I'm just a simple guy I'm a simple man who found some amazing stuff. And I'm learning. I'm not as smart as some, there's a lot of people know a lot more than me, but I'm a damn good investigator, I'll tell you that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing, Wayne, is that I've had plenty of experience with media and Hollywood and stuff like this, and actually many avenues, some I haven't mentioned to you before, and it's never been a good interaction. I'm just, hey, I'm just saying what it is. Either is or it isn't. Yeah. And for me, it was not. And by the way, for most people that I talk to, they're not very pleased with how the interaction went. And also, of course, issues of funding, issues of manipulating, specifically editing what people say, inserting it in an incorrect order, omitting things people said, and then you pass it off as this is what happened. No, that is not what happened. And you damn well know it.
Yeah. When I was asked to go on the Oak Island, the producers contacted me and we talked several times. And one of their questions was, well, why don't you want to come on here? I says, number one, you'll have me sign an NDA and my stuff will be tied up for a year or so, and I can't do that. And number two, I said, you got the worst crime scene. That's unbelievable. Well, what do you mean by that? I says, you had people digging there from the 1600s. And I said, I'm not even going to tell you what they were originally there for. I says, we know what they were there for through our investigation. I said, you dig a hole 10 feet and you throw that stuff down there. And now you throw the stuff that's on top of the soil down, covered up. Now the stuff on top is 10 foot below ground. Somebody comes by and digs it up. Well, how did this get 10 feet below ground? You got just the most contaminated crime scene in the world. And when you find stuff, that's from the 15th, 16th, or probably 17th, 18th century, well, sure, the French and England were there. They were there a lot of times. The Bay of Fundy was important. We had found probably more than enough information to prove that the Phoenicians were up there as well as people from Chile, South America. So we look at a lot of different avenues. Who could have made that trip? Why would you want to come? And one of the biggest draws to North America and Canada, the United States and South America, was all of its massive wealth in gold and copper and silver. Gold was found just laying on the ground, by Gold River, just off of Mahone Bay there. They found more gold there, just digging it up a few feet below the ground in the gold rush. So, and it's something that Native Americans didn't have. They just didn't put their trust and faith in that type of object. It had no meaning to them. The thing with Native Americans was their treasure was the land that they lived on. That land gave them food, it gave them a home, it gave them clothes, it gave them medicine, it gave them an existence for generations to come. And a short side note on that, when the government went to purchase land from an elderly Native American, he was sitting by the fire, and they said, "We'll give you this much for your land." So he laid down some paper money, and the Native American looked at him and he says, "Throw that money in the fire." "Oh, no, if I do that," he says, "it'll burn up." He took a handful of dirt and threw it in the fire, and nothing happened. He says, "Why would we want something that is not valuable?" He said, "This land gives us everything. Why would we sell it? It gives us all of these things, and all you want it for is just to take the stuff away from it." He says, "We're not here for gain or for greed. We're here to survive, to live on, to take care of us." He said, "We think of the earth as our mother, and the Great Spirit as our father. He gave us this land to protect and to use it wisely." So that was the big disconnect with the Native Americans. Europeans were looking for profit, and Native Americans were just looking to live.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a totally different philosophy, life philosophy, perspective, value system, all that stuff. Yeah, and it's always just been unbelievable to me. I find myself, born in this country, and I look around me and I say, I don't value any of this stuff because I'm not interested I mean, I actually don't mind sports. Sports are fun to watch, but like one of the things, here's a good example with that in terms of if you've got like serious issues, your roads are falling apart, your kids are not being educated properly, stuff like this, and you have like hundreds of millions of dollars you could invest it in that, or you could build a new stadium. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And again, like sports, but the point is that for me, there's an order of operations here, and what that means is that you take care of the things you need to first. If you have time and resources left over, then yeah, by all means, go ahead and spend it on your entertainment.
Yeah. One thing that you can always tell how a race of people are is how they treat their elderly and their children. When they protect the weakest among them and give them all the greatest benefits of that you can possibly do for them are usually pretty good people, and their principles are pretty sound. But when you fail to even take care of the innocent, there's a great disconnect, and I have no time for such people.
Yeah, I agree, Wayne. And I'm actually fairly encouraged because and it's come up to me even with, of course, with my business too, and what I'm doing and how I teach and everything. Is that in the beginning I said, okay, I bet you people will say, jump right on it to be like, this is great. I want you to be a part of our group or our organization or whatever. Get involved with this. And I wasn't so much finding that. I was a little surprised. So eventually, after about a year, I said, okay, I'm just going to do it myself. I don't care. I've made the ovations towards people. I do everything with honesty and integrity. If you don't want to play fair and you don't want to be a decent person, then like you said, Wayne, then I don't really want to have anything to do with that. So I think to just grow it organically, I think that's really the only way that we're going to actually do this. And then the more, I think as we move on, the years go on, there's more and more people that actually say, yeah, I want good content. I don't want the History Channel anymore. I don't want like the Hollywood spin, which is totally fake, and it's just for ratings and money and stuff. People want good stories. People want good information. And you know what's amazing about that is that when you actually can produce that, and it's actually like organically exciting, you go out and you make a discovery, and it's not scripted at all. That's actually, in my opinion, that's actually even better TV than the scripted TV or the stuff that's even remotely altered. You know, you're going to have viewers. They don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's at Team Templar North America. That's what we do. We'll tell you this like it is. If we know, we'll tell you, and if we don't know, we're going to say that too. We want to bring people along on this journey. This has went from me just finding something almost 40 years ago to 2018, and the synchronicity of it. Sean Williams was going through a similar revelation, and we had talked about it quite a bit. And he even wrote it in his book Questus. And he was around on the Great Lakes as a young man, sailing the Great Lakes, working for different companies. He was coming in contact with Native Americans who were teaching him to carve soapstone. And one of them even said, "Your guardian is the bear," without even knowing him. And gave him a bearskin jacket and a bear claw. So there was they knew he was a good person, and all of his life he has maintained that reputation. And like I said, he has walked away. Just before I met him, he had walked away from a major archaeological site because of the shenanigans going on. So he was a hard one. I didn't have to sell him. I just showed him what I had and told him the truth. And we're to the point now. If we can get the funding, Dave, we can get people here. We haven't excavated yet because we want everything to be documented from the first time we put a shovel into the ground. We don't want to say, "Oh, I went there 3 weeks ago and dug this up." You know, that's fine and dandy. That sounds all good. But I'm always a little apprehensive unless I can go back and look and see, you know, is there 3 weeks of digging or is there 3 years of digging, you know? So all of our scenes are about only surface explored, looking for the markings, what's underground. I had archaeologists on standby with LiDAR and GPR, willing to come here on his own with his company because he was so interested in the site. Now we can take this all the way back to Rosslyn Chapel, which no one has ever, and no one else has ever been able to do, as far as my knowledge. You're finding possible, and I'm going to use the word possible, Templar markings. They could be Norse. They could even be Celtic. Sean has mentioned that many times that the tomb looked Celtic and can be repurposed by the Templar. So the Celtic were involved in a lot of travel way before the Norse.
Yeah, and Wayne,
So,
that was my initial feeling too. I mentioned that to you many. I say that all the time too. Is that when I first saw the tomb, I said that's like Stone Age. There's something going on with that. It looks like it fits with the megalithic sites to me across the world.
yeah.
And I think the Templar came in and I think they knew it was there somehow, Wayne. I don't know how.
Well,
But
what they were doing is that when you got the Viking who came to Norse, and the Norse that drifted into actually the Templar, that's where they came from. You got the Sinclairs, you got the Clan Gun. Sean is from the Clan Gun. They knew about this stuff. This was handed down in their maps. You know, people say Columbus discovered America. He was following maps that had been drawn hundreds of years prior. I got accounts that where him and his brother were on a ship 10 years before they came to Americas, sailing around the tip of Greenland. So, and the thing of it is, when they talked about Columbus coming to America, he never made it. He made it to the Caribbean and then went south. Never even landed foot in North America. That's how poorly history is portrayed.
there's
And
some just indication that I've learned recently that Columbus may have been trying to land on purpose on Hispaniola because he was potentially looking for the Fountain of Youth,
yeah,
way back before the 1500s when people were looking for that, before like Ponce de Leon. So, and then that, when you see that story develop, that gets even more interesting. And as you know, Wayne, I sent you that video about the Old World Florida YouTube channel.
Right.
And some of the things coming out there, specifically in relation to Florida, are absolutely groundbreaking. I don't know where this information is coming from, and I don't really care. What's important to me is that we look at it seriously, and when you can put things into context. Florida supposedly has the highest concentration of freshwater springs in the world, the entire world.
Yeah.
So, that's it. That's the number one resource right there, and I'm sure people knew that through all time. Some people suggested that the Garden of Eden, if people believe in that, it was in Florida, or at the very least in the Americas. And the track I'm following now, Wayne, is that the Americas were actually the original homeland. Is that it actually started here. Forget about Africa. I think it actually did start here. I do believe the continents were connected. But when you look at all the etymology and the symbolism and the tattoos and all this stuff, it's the thing that I know, the bottom line, it's not like it's been told. That's completely apparent, obvious. We need to get past that.
Yeah, a lot of the information has been scrubbed and what we call washed. I try to buy books that are from the 50s and 60s because a lot of that information isn't scrubbed or washed. And, a lot of cultures talk about the Great Flood, and there's many cultures that do. And one of the things that's very interesting about the earth being flooded, it's been reported that the flood never came from the heavens. It came from up from the earth.
When did you first hear that, Wayne?
I've been looking into that for quite a while now, and they talk about raining 40 days and 40 nights, and in Christianity, it talks about the earth opened up and waters gushed forth, filling the land. So I found that very interesting, and we're looking at some other subjects too that I'm not going to get into, but I'll give you a little insight, something that has got me perplexed, Dave. The travels around by people. Why is it that all the icebergs up in the Arctic are freshwater in the saltwater ocean?
Well, of course, what I had mentioned initially was the snowfall compacting, and then you said that there's no snow or something like along those lines, right? Was it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's hard to understand. How do you get fresh water out of the saltwater ocean, And obviously they had snowfall, but how long does it take to clear a glacier that's 100, 200 feet thick and maybe a mile long?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, there ain't enough snow falling, and these big glaciers tear off every year and break off and slide out into the ocean. And it's something that talked about 50, 60 years ago, dragging a glacier down to some of these countries that have poor water resources and melting that. And some places, I believe, already do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can comment, and actually, Wayne, you probably know this, but back in the day, I don't know if it was like late 1800s, maybe before that, I'm sure you know this, but of course they used to cut massive blocks of ice out of frozen lakes in the Northland everywhere, and then sell that like to the cities, into New York City and stuff for refrigeration before we had that going on.
Yeah, they would call ice houses, and what they would do, that the sawmills, nearly every town had a sawmill. There was so much timber, Dave, in this country before the land baron, the timber barons came in and just cleaned it off like locusts. So like the lakes around here, they had these ice saws. They were driven by hand, but then you would carve these blocks of ice, and then with these tongs, you'd pull them up, and then you'd take them to these shacks, and they would cover them with sawdust. Sawdust is such a good insulator, and they would sell that to people. Yeah, that's been happening for a long time, probably for centuries.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get back to this underwater flood that happened. Is there, and again, I know if you can't share with me, that's totally fine. But what I'm thinking conceptually now, is there a specific area of the planet where it came up? or was it fairly uniform?
We'll have to set aside and have a phone call. How's that?
Okay, no problem. Yeah, and I also want to mention this. Of course, I spent a lot of time in Alaska. I think I told you that when I worked up there in tourism for quite a while. And so I've seen glaciers up close. I mean, I've literally I stood right next to it, and I've been in some ice caves and things like that. So I've had the firsthand look at them, and you can see them receding. A lot of the areas in Alaska will have like a paved walkway, and then they'll put little placards along the walkway saying like 1973, 1930, and you can see how far back, it's melted and everything. But when you go up to it, conceptually, and I have no idea. I wasn't near. I was born in the 80s, so I absolutely, and no one alive can say for sure, oh, that's how that was formed that millions of years ago or whatever, or the dinosaur. We weren't here, we didn't see it. We can do our best, but we need to have the humility to say that, okay, well, this is my best shot, and I have good evidence. Anyway, the snow gets so compacted that it essentially turns the ice blue because the light it can't penetrate basically.
Right.
So
right.
It's really interesting to see that, and you put your hand up against it. It's just the most solid piece of ice you've ever seen in your life. Some people, they used to take them out of some of the lakes in Alaska that glaciers feed. There's all kinds. Some glaciers fall into the ocean. Some glaciers fall into ponds and lakes and stuff like that. It's everything that you can imagine possible. But basically, so one of these ponds, it's actually a lake, fairly large lake. And people in the summertime, they fill up their cooler with some of the pieces of ice that are broken off. And they say, this is a solid piece of ice. And it's like it's like the heart of summer. I mean, it's not ridiculously hot in Alaska, but believe me, it actually gets a lot hotter than people think. I've even seen up to, I want to say 80s, at least 85. It's shocking to people for like a day. And then at night, it does cool down at night usually. But the thing is that it still stayed in its solid form for a shockingly long time because of the compacting. If that's solid and it's one piece, then it's going to last for a very long time. So anyway, I have that firsthand perspective of the glacier activity, and it's really fascinating. Everything is fascinating to me, just trying to understand.
Well, we at Team Templar, we try to look at a whole bunch of things. We don't try to, we'll only discount it if it's just out of theoretically possible, There's things that you don't have to know about to not disprove. I can tell you right now, I can't fly. So I'm not going to try to prove that man could fly at one time. We just have to go by what we have. Understanding the facts that are here and there and what we can prove and make these connections. And I think I'm really humbled, Dave, to know people like yourself, people from around the world who reach out to me and ask me questions and have wanted to join Team Templar. And we just kind of told them, well, not right now, but I talk to people from Australia, New Zealand, Norway, London, Scotland, Great Britain, France, Canada, California, you name it. And for some reason, that really seemed to be drawn to us. And we always try to present them with factual information, good or bad. We may go through this whole thing and get there and say, yeah, nice bunch of rocks, but these are just natural. Okay. Well, if that's the way it turns out, it won't be because we were trying to be deceptive. We were actually starting to release some videos and hoping to get some funding to show people just a small sample of the information that we're sitting on. One of our biggest wealth of information is that Sean has inherited the work of Andrew Sinclair, who is probably one of the best Templar researchers of all time, in his work underneath Rosslyn Chapel. And we have that, things that have never been seen or even discussed. So then I'm privy to all of that, and so I get to match it up to here in Wisconsin. that's why we're really, in the last year, we're really excited to have made some of these discoveries.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think I've supported you from the beginning, Wayne, of course, because for me too, as I said, here finally we have a group of people who are going to do it right. And guess what? It's not that hard to do it right. But anytime there's money and deception, it always seems to go that way. We did this.
Yeah,
Well, in actually, I'll tell you what, Wayne. In terms of you mentioned the BBC, and of course, I've seen all of the snippets that Alan Scott has produced, and they're all excellent. I mean, he's really professional. It's no nonsense. It's so good facts, good information. And the thing that probably one of the things that irritates me the most is that I don't want to. First of all, don't condescend your viewers. That's number one. And don't paint it like it isn't. Don't try to manipulate it. A lot of it is inflection in the voice. It's like, look, you're talking to me like I'm like 5. Cut
yeah,
the crap out and let's just tell me what
yeah,
it is. And also, don't lead me into what you're trying to make me believe. Just give me the information, and then I'm going to tell you, that's great, or I think you're full of,
yeah.
I think
Well,
you're full of nonsense.
you wouldn't be at that point if you weren't actually interested in it, and you're at the point where you want the truth. Working with Alan Scott and some of the things he told me, it was very difficult to get him to come on board. And I'll tell you, you talk about meeting him for the first time, straightforward. You lie to me once, or you present me false information once, I will never have nothing to do with you again. I won't even talk to you. And I said, well, that's good. Then that's the kind of guy I'm looking for. And
Yep.
we do a lot of remote work, and he's a challenge because he's such a technician. And what's amazing about Sean and Alan is that they'll only give you good stuff that's provable and factual. They won't even hint around that, oh, it could be, if we say it could be this, we kind of stay away from that, Dave, because we don't want to give that impression. Um, the highest probability of evidence is what we'll only put out there if we don't have hard evidence, such as a carving. But if we say something has probably happened this way, we've looked at a lot of different resources, going back to the Native Americans, through their time in history, through their stories and legends, then ties in from Europeans writing about the same thing and following it all backwards. So when we say probable, it's because we can almost prove that it's true. But like you have said many times and said very well, we weren't there.
Right. It's a shocking to me. I have to remind people of that. I mean, I've developed enough humility in the time I've done research and things I've worked on, where sometimes I'm absolutely shocked at what I find because that's not what I thought it was going to be. But
Yeah.
the thing is that it doesn't reflect at all. I don't believe reflect poorly on me. All it's saying is that this is what I thought with my training and the evidence that I have, and if it's not that, okay, fine. But it doesn't mean that I failed or something. I think that's what people are afraid of. It's like they think they're going to look bad or something. You have to have
Well,
enough belief in yourself that it's okay. So it's not a big deal. And also, you just pivot. If you're good at what you do, you should be able to pivot with new information and then reframe it, and you'll be fine.
exactly. And if you're an honest person to begin with, and you talk about the failure and not being able to prove it, so what? Yeah, I followed this. It turned out to be a dead end. The information at the time was very good, but it turned out to be nothing. Well, that's a sign of a good investigator. So you got led down a dead end street. You wouldn't have known it was dead end unless you went down there and taking a look. And so you regroup, you go back to the original point and say, did I miss where it led a different way? So you have to be really open-minded. And if you just be honest with people and tell them the truth, I think they follow you a lot quicker and a lot faster and a lot deeper than by trying to sell them some smoke and mirrors, like academia tries to tell you now that somehow we crawled out of a swamp and all of a sudden decided to build a fire and catch a rabbit and roast it. I'm having a hard time, Dave, making that leap.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the thing is that I have to also say, I try to be as respectful as possible. I'm a very direct person. So if someone says, yeah, this is, or I read an article, it's like all the time, or someone is doing an interview. And I just tell my friend last night, I'm like, when you're sharing a story with someone, I'm going to tell you the proper way to frame it so that, first of all, you cover your own ass. That's important too, is that you're trying to make sure that you're covering all the bases, making sure everything's secure as much as possible. Again, good science and good investigation. So what I say, and this is just really how I am as a person, but what I say when I anytime I pronounce something, as I basically say, based on my evidence and based on my training, this is what I believe. This is what I believe. I'm never saying this is what it is, ever. I learned that like 10 years ago. Don't do that. But what you say
Yeah,
is, according to what I have, this is my opinion on this, and I think it's supported very well. And then you leave it in everyone's hands, and they decide what they think about it.
yeah. You're basing your conclusions on the evidence that you have at the time, the statements, the physical evidence, the high probability of could have been, and who could have done it. All of these things got to be taken into account. And I think if people stop by our website, Team Templar North America, or go to YouTube, the Wisconsin Project, you'll get a sense that what we're bringing you is factual stuff. And I think Alan does a great job of narrating it, great job of editing and putting it together. As you know, these things take a long time to do. We're
Mm.
doing it over thousands of miles apart, so it's very time consuming and expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that when I, of course, when I produce shows and everything, I'm not the technology guy. I'm interested in the information and getting it out to people so they can listen to the conversation and contribute. But it takes a huge amount of time to edit. If you're putting text on the screen and fading in and out of scenes and stuff like that, adding music. I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? I actually have a stack of books that I'm still trying to read, and I've read probably 15 books this winter so far. To give people an idea of what I do when I have when my free time. Sometimes it's research, sometimes it's in my free time. But the point is that I'm not the person that's going to spend time doing the editing because it's a huge commitment. It takes a
Yeah,
huge amount of time to put that together. It does look nice, Wayne, and I think you agree. But
yeah. Um, Dave, to be honest with you, I surround myself with a bunch of people a whole lot smarter than me. So I'm saying I'm good at finding stuff, but I may not be good at putting it out in film. But it's such a blessing to have these people get put in your way and come to you from different directions that you would. There's no way that I could have found Sean Williams, and there's no way I could have found Alan Scott. It's just almost like these people were sent to me to help me to bring this to fruition. And for lack of better descriptors, that's just what I feel. We're like led towards each other because we came from similar walks of life in just different countries. That's all.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
and I think, Dave, I'm going to have to run. I got a couple things to do, but um, I don't know how we're doing on time. But I sure enjoyed the time we have together.
Oh yeah, me too, Wayne. It was absolutely excellent. Um, okay, well, I really appreciate you being here, and I'd love to have you back sometime. It would be great to continue the conversation, see what kind of progress you guys are making, and everything. I'm sure it's going to be great. Okay, so you'd already mentioned. I know the on Facebook, Team Templar North America is the website, correct?
There's two of them. There's a private group, and then there's a public group. The private group is you'll be able to see a little bit more. And this is what happened real quickly is that we were posting a lot of stuff about our research on our private group. And all of a sudden we ended up seeing it on some TV shows. And we're like, oh boy. So I must have spent 2 days pulling stuff down. And then we just said going forward, we will just give generalities about what we found because we worked too long and too hard just to have someone take it from us. If they would have just asked us and said, hey, could we use this and we'll give you credit? Sure. You know, and we have talked about this many times. No one person is going to solve this. I need the help of many people. And that's why I'm so blessed where I can reach out to people in France and Spain and Norway, in London and England and Portugal, people who are really smart. So I'm just very blessed, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if people want to follow the work, they just send you a request to join the group on Facebook, right? And then there's also a public one, Team Templar
Yes.
North America. Okay, and then you guys also have a YouTube channel. I think it's the same, Team Templar North America.
And it's called the Wisconsin Project, and some people say they can't find it. I think it's because it says the Wisconsin Project. There's a lot of projects out there I didn't realize at the time called Wisconsin Project. But the Wisconsin Project, if you see Team Templar's logo, or the rock face on it, or the wolf, that'll be us. And I think you'll see some great things, and you'll hear some good information, and you'll get a feel for the team, how we evolved into where we're at today.
Yeah, definitely. And I've seen all of them. I can vouch for that. They're really well done. What I'll do, Wayne, is I'm going to put the links in the description on the YouTube video. I'm also going to put the kind of introductory video that Alan did, about the 17-minute video, down there for people to click on.
Great.
And
Great.
I
Thank
also,
you so much.
oh, you're welcome. And also, we had Wayne on the show with me and Karen Holton, of course, Aliens and Astrology podcast, which is also on my channel. And we covered a lot in that too. Some things were similar, some things were additional. But you can see, if you want to see some of the other pictures too of the site, you can go there and watch that show that me and Karen did. That's on my YouTube channel as well. You can see the tomb and everything if you want to get a visual for that. And then, of course, the entire Wisconsin Project YouTube channel, which I'll put up there. But anyway, thanks for being here, Wayne. I mean, it's just excellent. I will always support you, and obviously let me know if I can help in the future.
Thanks a lot, Dave. It's been an honor to know you and be able to pick up the phone and talk and be invited to be on your show.
You too, Wayne. I really appreciate it.
All right, you take care, sir.
Yeah, you too.